Hey guys, happy Friday. It is a Friday here. It's the first week of November, and I've actually filmed this once and I didn't really like the approach I made to it, so I'm doing this again. Today we're going to talk about the benefits of tracking your periods. Now some people do it manually on paper. You know, there are still ways that people do that. It's something that people have been doing as long as women have been trying to track fertility cycles. Women have been tracking menstrual periods and menstrual symptoms, that sort of thing. But, you know, in the modern age with smartphones and iPads, you know, tablets, things of that nature, there are apps out there, lots and lots of them. And when I first started doing this, I kind of approached it from trying to show you some of those apps. And then I decided, you know what, that's not really how I wanted to do this. Basically what I want to do is talk to you about answering the question, basically, why would anybody want to track their periods? Because that's the question that I get a lot is, well, if you're not actively trying to get pregnant, if you're not trying to track your fertility window to either prevent or obtain, conception, then why would you want to track your period? And I don't track my periods for either of those reasons. I use my period tracking apps for lots of other reasons, and there are women who use them for lots of different things. So that's what this video is going to be about, is why you might want to use a period tracking app for reasons other than fertility, and we'll get into the fertility issues also. And then I will tell you which one is my favorite and why. So let's go over the fertility aspect in the beginning, because that is by far the most popular reason that people seek out a period tracking app. They are either actively trying to avoid becoming pregnant or they are actively trying to get pregnant. And the purpose of using a period tracking app for these people would be to identify the fertility window, which is the number of days where you are most likely to get pregnant. You're either identifying that window because you want to take advantage of that window to have a baby, or you're looking for that window so that you can avoid sexual activity during that window in order to avoid becoming pregnant. And everything that I have read on the use of the apps for this purpose, for fertility tracking, is that for people who have relatively regular cycles that fall within a regularly normal length window. For example, the average or considered ideal menstrual cycle is a 28-day cycle, and most people have a cycle that falls within a day or two of 28 days, which is why, you know, throughout history women have associated their periods with the lunar cycle. And it used to be believed that the moon actually governed the menstrual cycle because of the similarity in the length. Anyway, for people who have really irregular periods, like, you know, your cycle is a different number of days pretty much every month, or for women who have a very short cycle, you know, less than 25 days, less than 21 days, that kind of thing, or for women who have an abnormally long cycle, for example, being over 30 days long, over 31, 32 days. For those women, according to everything I've read, I'm not a doctor, certainly not a fertility specialist, so this is the stuff that I have heard, the stuff that I have read, and if you want to use an app for tracking your periods for fertility, please do that in conjunction with a doctor so that you can get the best out of it, because I'm not your girl for that. But the utility in period tracking apps is that you can create, over a period of time, really good data collection on when your periods start, when they end, when there's the heaviest flow. There are many of the period tracking apps have other features, so that if you have a particular kind of sharp pain at a point in your cycle, you can mark all of those things, and over a period of time you will be able to identify. In a lot of people's cases, you can identify when you ovulate without having to pee on an ovulation stick or whatever all the time. Although most people who are really trying to conceive because they're having trouble with it typically do both of those things in conjunction, just to see how everything is lining out. But basically, the standard response that I've heard in everything that I've read about period tracking use for fertility purposes is that it is much more effective at helping you become pregnant than it is at preventing pregnancy. The rhythm methods and everything, you know, there are people who swear by it. They've used it for years and they've never had an unwanted pregnancy. But female fecundity is, you know, or fertility is not necessarily the same for everybody. So for a lot of people it works, and that's fantastic, but you need to know, if you've never tried the rhythm method or a natural method, which is to observe your menstrual cycle and the different fluids in your menstrual cycle and the different textures of the fluids in your menstrual cycle and the different positions of your cervix. There's a lot involved with really getting to know your cycle well enough to use it to either facilitate conception or to avoid conception. And you have to know, if you go into this wanting to use it as a natural form of birth control, that it's not by any stretch of the imagination a 100% kind of thing. I think risky would be the best term for that. So if you're going to use this for religious or medical health reasons, because you don't tolerate other forms of birth control well, then I give you all of my warmest karma and feelings and, well wishes on that. But make sure that you don't go into it blind thinking that this is a cure-all, because there's a lot of getting to know your body in ways that, if you've never tried this before, you probably have never done that. So the period tracking app, think of it as a tool in a larger collective toolbox for tracking your fertility. Now, I've never used an app for those purposes, as I stated. So my recommendation would be that you start by speaking to a gynecologist about it, or an obstetrician or a midwife, someone who really knows their stuff on the fertility cycles. And then you can come into the communities. There's lots of women who use period tracking apps because they are trying to conceive, or as a form of birth control because it is their choice for birth control. And you can ask them how they manage it, how they use it, how their cycles might be different than yours, that sort of thing. There are safe private communities on Facebook and in other places on the internet where you can talk to people privately about these things and get all of your questions answered. I'm not your girl for that, but I did want to introduce and talk about the fertility aspect of period tracking a little bit, because that is the most popular reason that people go for it. But there are other benefits, and those are the reasons I use my period tracker, and we'll get into those. The reason I first started using a period tracking app was because I was curious about how cloth was changing, and reusables in general, because I was using cloth and cups before I started using a period tracking app. And I didn't know they existed, and I had never tried to track my period, because if you've seen any of my original videos, the reason I switched, I had terribly irregular periods. I mean, they were truly just all over the place and completely unpredictable. Pretty much my entire menstruating life until I switched to cloth like a year and a half ago. And so I just wanted to see, because after I switched, we'd gone like 5 months down the reusables road with me, and I was noticing that my periods they felt like they were coming more regularly. I was having one per month. And, like I had one in May, and I had one in June, and then I had one in July, and I had one in August, and they all seemed to be coming to me at the very end of the previous month and kind of going over to the first, or in that first couple of weeks of the month. And I was like, this is really kind of regular. And so I got the period tracking app just out of curiosity. I wanted to see if it was just my imagination that my periods were becoming more regular, or if they actually were. And I don't know why. It was just a moment of curiosity that I had. I really didn't expect to get much out of it, except to answer the question, am I just imagining this, or have I really actually started to regulate my cycle a little bit? And so that was what started it. And then I have noticed and learned quite a few things about my cycle since I started tracking. Medically speaking, I am still irregular because my cycle varies from 30 to 33 days in length. And that is, obviously outside of the 28-day window. And it varies, I have a variation in there that's, not, so I'm not technically regular, but I am much, much more regular than I ever was before I started using reusables. And so that did answer that question for me. But as the months went on and I continued to track, because it's really simple and you don't have to use all of the features that don't apply to you, I basically would just track when it started and when it ended, and I didn't really put much more information into that for a while. But over a period of time, I noticed that the prediction about which day the period would start and all of that became more and more accurate. And now my period app is right almost every time. Some of the benefits that I noticed by accident that I never really intended to even look for or even thought about, where I noticed some things about my PMS cycles, because on the Clue app and on many of the other apps, there are places for you to record things like your emotional state. There are places for you to record things like breast tenderness, menstrual cramping, severity of menstrual cramping, symptoms like bloating, how often you have intercourse. You know, you can keep track of all of these things just by spending literally less than 30 seconds a day punching the different things on the app that apply to you or that you find an interest in tracking. And some things that I have noticed is how different medications affect my cycle. I have noticed several things that I thought, I mean, honestly, most of my life I have considered myself borderline mentally ill with a couple of things. You know, I think most of us do. We have things that we, you know, could kindly refer to as quirks in our personality, and I am a worry machine. I'm an anxiety machine, and I have when I was younger I sought professional help for it because it kind of started interfering with my daily life when I was younger, and you know, I had that under control, or at least I thought I did. Cadence has joined me and she's helping, so she just laid down on her little bed over there. I don't know if we've decided we're done with the shaking and the scratching and the coming up to mommy and whining for pets. We'll see. So anyway, I pretty much had decided by my mid-30s that I had that all under control, and I had returned to a place where I was functioning really well, and it didn't give me fits as often as it did in my 20s. That's a whole other topic, but what was interesting is that when I started tracking this, and the reason I never noticed this before I switched to reusables, I think, is because my periods were so irregular. It was very typical for me to skip periods. It was very typical for me to have 2 in a row, like with only a 5-day or a 1-week break in between. And then I wouldn't have another one for 2 more months. You know, so that I was extraordinarily irregular before I switched to cloth. And we could hypothesize about what it was about the switch that did that for me, but really all I care about is that now it's regular. Well, now that it's become more regular, I've noticed patterns in my anxiety that are directly related to the hormonal fluctuations of the menstrual cycle that I never knew about before, and that none of my professionals ever honed in on or investigated, which seems kind of worrisome to me because it's kind of obvious, isn't it? But the app illustrated that to me. So I know now, and it's even illustrated on the Clue. The Clue app has a circular graphic that demonstrates the cycle, and it'll show you where your predicted ovulation window is, and where your predicted PMS window is, and where your predicted menstruating window is. And so the PMS, it's cute. It's shown as little clouds on the circle, and that has gotten more and more accurate as well. And so I can look at my period tracking app, and if I'm in the cloudy section of the circle, I can then sit down and more realistically assess my anxiety level. It's like these things that I'm worried about. This is chemical. This is not reality. So for me, the benefit has been better self-assessment and better regulation of anxiety symptoms. And I'm sure that that could relate in a number of different ways for different people. Some of the apps have places where you can track your appetite. So if you are a person who deals with being underweight or being overweight, and you are trying to get a bead on why you undereat or overeat during particular times, you may end up finding that that is tied in some way to hormonal fluctuations. And a period tracker app can help you identify that. If you are a person who has, for example, polycystic ovarian syndrome or any of the other afflictions that can seriously mess with a woman's fertility and her menstrual regularity and menstrual severity, the tracking app can help you identify certain aspects of that, when it happens to you, when it stops, and it can help both you and your physicians kind of hone in on some things. And again, that gets into medical questions, and I'm not qualified to really talk about those things, but the period app is good for the individual who's using it for identifying cycles, for identifying patterns that you may never have associated with your menstrual cycle. Things like appetite, things like emotional fluctuations, things like pain, that you have. Like maybe you've just always had a particular kind of pain and it comes periodically and you don't know why. And then you may start to notice that it's always during your ovulation window, or it's always in the week before your period begins, or something like that. The menstrual cycle has such a tremendous effect on the female body. So if you were born, if you were assigned the female sex, there are things about the menstrual cycle that will affect you in so many different ways that I don't think we pay enough attention to. And it all goes back to our refusal to deal with menstruation publicly. We're not supposed to talk about it. We're not supposed to acknowledge it. It's like a criminal cardinal sin to suggest that maybe it's PMS. And PMS manifests in different ways for different people. For me, it has never been, the thing they make fun of on comedy programs. It's never been irritability or the tendency to snap at people. It has been a tendency towards heightened anxiety. And I never knew that was menstrual related. I really thought that I had something seriously, that there were bridges in there that were not formed properly or whatever, and that I just had this chemical problem. Well, the problem is chemical, but it's related to my menstrual cycle. And now that I know that's going to come, it just changed everything. All of these problems go back to the social taboo. They all go back to the public refusal to speak about menstruation because we're not supposed to talk about it publicly. And I'm not really sure where or why that all began, but it seems to be rather universal. Excuse me. And yeah, she's needy today. So the basic thing is that there are probably aspects of your health, aspects of your emotional stability, aspects of, just varying physical patterns that maybe you've never associated with your menstrual cycle before. And a period tracking app, if you use it, relatively consistently for about 4 or 5 months, you'll start to see patterns emerge. And if you use it for 6 months to a year, that data is going to get more and more accurate. And really, honestly, I think there's no end to the number of things that you could discover about your body and how your body works that you didn't know before. So to me, that is the number one benefit of a period tracking app, is just better self-knowledge about your body and about why the things that you do and why the things that you feel happen when they happen. Okay, so I'm going to show you the Clue app on my phone. And let me see if I can get away from the glare so you can see it. This is the Clue app. It's hard doing this backwards. And when you open it, this is the circle I was telling you about. Now, you can't see the PMS window on this one because I'm on a brand new phone, so this one only has 1 month's worth of data in it, and it's the current month, so there's really nothing I have to go through and I have to manually re-enter because I'm kind of a computer idiot and I haven't figured out how to just automatically make my old phone talk to my new phone. I'm going to have to look into that. I've been resisting going in to hand enter all of the data from the previous year and a half, or I think I've been using my app for about a year. But anyway, I've been hesitant to go in and manually re-enter all the data, but this is basically what it looks like. And it depends on how much data you enter will determine what this looks like. And if you put in your PMS symptoms, oh, here we go, it's flashing out. When you enter your PMS symptoms, it'll show up over here as a cloudy window, and this is where it illustrates the predicted fertility window, and this is where it shows you your actual period. Now, mine's really off right now, so the actual data you're looking at, the steroid shots that I have recently received have seriously changed my period, but that's supposed to be temporary for just a couple of months. So let me go in, and instead of trying to show you screenshots and do voiceovers, I'm just gonna click on some things and show you what it looks like on my phone. Okay, I'm going to get this closer, see if you can see it. Down here you have calendars, and you have history, and you have all kinds of things, and this works differently on most apps, but on most of them you have this sort of thing where you can have a calendar view, where you can have your history shown, and in the Clue app, each month is represented as one of these lines. So every month that you've entered data, there will be a line like this, so that you can see patterns forming. And then in the history, there's places you can also put in notes and things like that. And then also from this cycle, when you go in to enter 2 days data, you'll get all these different things. You can put in your flow, your pain, your emotions, whether you had sex or not, your energy level, that sort of thing. You can track sleep, and then they have other things. This one, I haven't customized it yet. But when you go into the settings and you customize, there's all kinds of different things that you can track. And that's true for quite a lot of the period tracking apps. There's lots of different options, lots of different kinds of things. You can track your mood, you can track your physical symptoms, you can track pain, all those things that I've talked about. And pretty much all of the more popular apps do have a variety of things that you can do. So they're good for fertility, they're good for tracking the regularity of your cycles, they're good for identifying your PMS, they're good for identifying whether or not pain or headaches or anything that you have chronically, you can observe whether or not it occurs at the same place in your menstrual cycle every month. So I highly recommend them. Whether you're trying to have a baby, whether you're trying to use natural rhythm methods to avoid having a baby or not, I think that period tracking apps are an excellent tool for people. And I think that our cycles affect us in ways that most of us really don't consider. So give them a try. That was my little speech about them. I'm going to watch this video and see if I like it better than the last one I tried to do. And I will put a link to the Clue website or whatever, so that you can go and look at more information about that one. But it is not by any means the only one out there. So go shopping if you're interested and put one on your phone. Most of them are free, and the ones that aren't free are very inexpensive. So just give them a try. I think you'll really like it. I really do. I found it extraordinarily useful, and I hope that a lot of you will as well. Okay, that's it. I will talk to you again soon. Bye.